First of all, let's start with just thank you very much for doing it. So Fred Burke from the SOUS BOCK, this is the SOUS BOCK series of interviews, and he's delighted we're having a chat with you. He's very fond of you anyway. He's very fond memories of you and your generosity. So you have a big hello from Fred Burke at the SOUS BOCK. So you're considered to be one of the best of all time by a lot of the players. Jean-Pierre Rive, as I said today, who's also taken part in this series, speaks very fondly of you. So you started off, you were sent to Millfield, a very posh school in England, in Somerset, on a scholarship. How did that come around? Was that because of your sporting ability, or was it because you were very bright, or was it a bit of both?
I doubt if it was the latter. No, I think I showed some athletic prowess. I went through the school. I failed my 11 plus to go into the local grammar school. So when I went to the secondary modern school for a 12 months, there was a PE master who taught 5-6 miles away, but he also ran the youth club in the evening in this particular school. So rumor came around very, very quickly from the other boys in the village. Oh, what a fantastic man he was, how good he was in physical education. So cut a long story short, I went to the youth club and I said, can I join? Cut a long story short again, I wasn't old enough, but he acknowledged that and accepted me. The shock of maybe failing my examination meant that there was an opportunity then. Well, not an opportunity. There was my father brought back some hobnail boots and a helmet, a miner's helmet, put it on the table one day. And I said, oh, you got some new boots and a new hat, Dad? No, he said, try them on there for you. I thought, oh, God. I said, what do I want? Huh? He said, you're not working in school, so there's only one place for you. He said, and that's down on the ground. That concentrated the mind. I started working a bit harder without question. And it meant that I therefore had an opportunity to go to the local technical school.
Right.
Which is where Bill Samuel was a physical education master.
Right.
And a wonderful man as well. So for the next 2-3 years, he taught me gymnastics, athletics. He said, I think you ought to go for a trial for the under-15s, local under-15s side. What position do you want to play? Oh, centre, sir. Oh, he said, you don't want to be a centre, he said. Centres for hands in your pockets and Brill cream on your hair. He said, you're a gymnast and you're an athlete and you're a this and you're a that. There's only one position for you, scrum half. And I'll teach you, and I'll teach you. It's worth relating the tale because I was starting from nowhere. So for the next 3 years, I was under his keen eye and tuition. And one day I was running into the gym, and Bill Samuel said, I've been thinking, have you heard of Millfield School? I said, well, sort of. Because Mary Bignell, who was one of our outstanding athletes of that period of time, great long jumper, Olympic gold medalist, and a heptathlete, she'd received quite a bit of publicity on a scholarship to Millfield, being a local girl from that area. So from that humble beginning, Bill Samuel, unbeknown to me, wrote to the school and to the headmaster and suggested that maybe there was an opportunity for me at Millfield School, since I was an athlete of outstanding promise in my area, and he put down Gareth, a long jumper, and I was offered a place at Millfield for 2 years, which without question opened the doors to so many opportunities. We had a very, very good, an exceptional team at Millfield at that time, and we had an unbeaten season. It got me into the Welsh schoolboys team. My athletics improved, and I won the All England Championship in hurdles, ran for England. Don't tell anybody that. But the reason I'm saying that is not that I conceited, and far from it, is just the door opened and the opportunity was there for me. No, just what that period of time offered me. We had great there was great opportunities at Millfield to A, play with outstanding players, to to play with an outstanding team. The facilities were second to none. Even by comparison to today, it was just an outstanding school, and I was very, very happy there. And it offered me the opportunity to measure myself against other guys, because even at Millfield, even within trying to get into the athletics team, you had to compete at a very high level. To get into the rugby team, you had to do the same thing. I might have been a big fish in a small pond in my own locality, but I was certainly a small fish in a very, very big pond at Millfield, and so it taught me a great deal. That was basically how all that started, and no question about it. It it not only improved my skill factors, opportunity to train with excellent facilities, but it made you far more competitive because of the standard and quality of the people that were there.
And do you think playing different sports might have informed your later skills for which you are known for in the rugby pitch?
Yes, without question. And I try and tell young people today not to sort of be in too much of a hurry. Okay, things have changed dramatically. I acknowledge that, where there is a tremendous amount of time expected, and they want, and a tendency to want kids to concentrate in one direction and what have you. Whereas I still learn from my own, or I still speak about my own background in saying that, you know, when you're 15, 16 and very talented, and you might be a very fast wing, who knows, you might be still that size in 5, 6 years time. So don't be too keen to sort of change your sport. Athletics helps everybody, you know, and I would emphasize that you carry on doing the things that were important, that are still important, especially in school. Gymnastics was another favorite of mine, and Bill Samuel made sure that I concentrated on my gymnastics, because he could see, although he had visions of it, I hadn't quite seen it. He had visions of me being a scrum half.
Mm-hmm.
He could see that my gymnastics, my athletics, my involvement in the other sports all contributed towards a skill factor, even though it might not be obvious at that time, especially for me. There is a great danger sometimes in young people concentrating far too much on maybe on a sport or an event that they're exceptional at 15, 16, 17 years of age. But as we all know, as you physically outgrow your carcass, so to speak, you know, things might not be the same in 3 or 4, 5 years' time.
How was it to be a Welshman in Millfield, which is quite a posh English school?
Not bad at all, because I wasn't just the only, not necessarily Welshman, but it was a very international school.
Right.
So I never felt uncomfortable or any problems at all. And anyway, the 2 rugby masters were Welshmen who looked after us fantastically well. You know, made sure that we came down to their houses and shared the family of their Welshness. And also, as I said, we were very much an international. In the sevens team that I played in, on 1 or 2 occasions, we actually had a different player from every country in the side, and we had a Brazilian, we had several Irishmen, we had several English boys, we had Thai, we had a Liberian, huge Liberian winger who was an outstanding player, probably one of the finest rugby players I've ever seen. Big lad. I would have made a great American footballer without question. So yeah, fond memories, and learned so much from the culture and the capability of these boys, who were all talented in a different way. And so for me, without question, it was a huge opportunity, and of course, I suppose being away from home and then having to sort of live and do things off your own back instead of looking to your father and mother to help you, living on yourself. You know, it was a great experience.
Mm.
Little did I believe that within a year, well, in actual fact, one of the schoolmasters mentioned that he said, Gareth, I've enjoyed watching you play. And I'm telling you, I believe you'll play for Wales within a year. That frightened me more than anything else. I wouldn't say that I lacked for confidence as such, but it wasn't something that was over the rainbow, that was so far away. You couldn't believe that anything like that would happen, you know?
Mm.
So, but there's no doubt that that environment, that opportunity that I just shared over the last couple of years at Millfield School was a great, great help.
Must have been, because you were 19, weren't you, when your first game against France in '67?
Yes, correct. Yes.
So, well, it didn't end well. That game wasn't a victory, but how was that? I mean, 19 to represent your country. How did that feel?
With great trepidation, I was looking forward to the match, which was in Colombe, as it was in those days, with players of the caliber of Benoit Doga and Christian Carré, the Gachassan brothers. Fantastic. What a great experience it was. I can remember everything about it, and I can't remember anything about it. It's a funny, peculiar feeling because the game just vanished in front of me. And I remember thinking, I was somewhat annoyed when the final whistle went. And I thought, oh, must be a line out or something. And Dewi Bebb ran up to me and put the ball under my shirt. And he said, there. I said, well, what's that for? It's a line out, is it? Or whatever. No, he said, the game's over. It went so quickly. And there was a bit of disappointment there. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute we should have, or maybe could have won the match. But there were opportunities within the game. So there was somewhat of a disappointment that we'd lost the game. Anyway, the most important thing was I had the red shirt in my hands. And in actual fact, I've got to mention this to a great friend of mine as well, Christian Daroui, who was the French captain that day, gave me his shirt as well. Wow. Stuart Watkins knew him, and he said, "It's Gareth's first cap." He said, "Can I have your shirt?" Yes, he says. And so he gave me his shirt as well. So I had the two shirts on my first international to remind me of that epic day, which I've never forgotten.
So 53 caps, 13 as captain, but 20 tries as a scrum half.
Well, I don't know. I wasn't greedy, was I? The game started to open up. We'd been through an era where there was a tendency to play touch rugby, so to speak. But of course, in that year, I think it might have been that year, just around about that time, the Australians invoked a new rule of no kicking direct to touch. Some people call it the Australian rule, and it opened up the game. Whereas full backs, you suggest stand in the 22 or 25 as it was in those days, catch the ball and hoof it back into touch, another line out, hoof it back into touch. In actual fact, there's a very famous match just prior to that, a year or so before, with the Welsh captain, who ironically turned out to be the Welsh coach of our era, start of our era, Clive Rowlands, played in a match against Scotland with 111 lineouts, of which he admitted to most of them, or committed it over the touchline. So the game evolved quite a bit during that time, and I think it suited our style of play, suited my style of play possibly, and it was exciting times because the rugby was beginning to open up and play this type of game. The French, you all know, had always had a way of playing this exciting, fantastic rugby. Allez, La France, and all this kind of thing. Come on. But I believe that international rugby had become a very dirge type game
Mm.
over a period of time.
Mm.
And obviously, and speaking from a personal point of view, I was very fortunate also that at that time, quite a number of young players came to the fore, came to the field. People like Barry John, Phil Bennett was in the shadows with Barry. David Watkins, who was such an eminent runner and a fantastic player who went to Salford Rugby League afterwards. Keith Jarrett, and a fantastic cricketer and a fantastic sportsman, all-round sportsman. He was an outstanding centre. Gerald Davis. All of a sudden, the team started having some very exciting young players coming together. And we seemed to sort of grow up together.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, with the encouragement of having coaches to help us prepare for matches, I think that was the biggest change of all. Whereas just a couple of years before, the team used to meet on a Saturday morning, have a bit of lunch and go and play the game. And, maybe they would have had one run out or something. At least in our first year or the last 2 years, in the first couple of years, we started having training sessions. We started getting to know one another. We began to talk about patterns of play. We had coaches coming in to help us.
What year was this? This would have been about 67.
That would have been 66, 67, 66, 67, 68. Clive Rowlands became the captain. Sorry, Clive Rowlands became the coach. He wasn't the first coach. David Nash was Wales's first coach. But Wales went to Argentina the following year, and Clive Rowlands was chosen as captain. Sorry, was chosen as coach at a time when almost half the country were drawing breath as if they were having a heart attack, saying, "Coaches, no, over our dead bodies." They don't have coaches. But of course, we could immediately see the enormous effect it had, and the confidence it had with a team, with a young team of youngsters coming into the fold, taking confidence and taking the help that even preparing a week before, and even this would make modern players sort of snigger, probably think, what's he talking about, But we used to meet on a Thursday evening, have a run out, jump on the train the next day, go to London and play. Then, of course, we started having a squad session on a Sunday before. Then we would have another run out on a Thursday. And that involvement, even if it was that minute, was a huge help to us in preparation.
The golden years of Welsh rugby, we're talking about this period now. Was it an uncanny mix of incredible players that you mentioned, like Barry John and Phil Bennett and JPR and all that? So on one side, there was exceptional talent, but it was also the mix of the coaching. Was it a perfect storm, like a super group of individuals? Was it just luck? Is that why it was an amazing
No,
game?
I wouldn't say it was luck, because I think the Welsh Rugby Union made a conscious effort to get coaches. Australia used to have a coach. New Zealand had coaches. South Africa had their coaches. But here in this part of the world, it was almost over our dead body. There was this ethos that they wanted to take to the grave. No, it's not a done thing. Prepare, train, coaches. Coaches is what you take the team to the ground. All that, we used to have all that, But all of a sudden, we began to see that things were beginning to change gradually. And of course, Ray Williams became an eminent part of that, his preparation. And all of a sudden, we could see the benefit of it, virtually game on game. We didn't win every game straight away, but you could see the improvement in people beginning to understand one another, the patterns of play that we played.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, it evolved probably quite slowly at the time in waiting. But when you look back upon it actually was a huge change. And so Wales won their first Triple Crown. They won, that is a team of that era, won in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
Wales took a number of young players to Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
Wales also contributed to the British and Irish Lions team to South Africa in 68, in that period of time, where we all benefited.
Mm-hmm.
Barry John, myself, Gerald Davis, Keith Jarrett, you know, to rub shoulders with the eminent Willie John McBride, Mick Doyle, these guys, well, household names, which we just kept looking. We were mesmerized by them, and we learned so much from them. And we were hungry young mouths, being fed by these boys. So, in a short period of time, we became fairly, and indeed, to be fair to the selection team, they gave us so ahead. They gave us, you know, if we lost a match, it wasn't the end of the world. Whereas there had been tendencies to lose a match, you were on the sideline and somebody else was picked. They gave us all a bit of an opportunity. And yes, a bit of success drip fed into the system, and all of a sudden it had a huge effect on the schoolboys that wanted to play. They wanted to emulate their heroes now in the Welsh team with, dare I say it, I don't want to become too sort of involved in trying to say that it changed the world. It didn't, but it changed the rugby scenery and the way in which we wish to play and the way in which we enjoyed playing.
Mm-hmm.
And we seem to be fortunate in having the right players coming into the fold. You've mentioned a number of them, you know, and I've mentioned a few: Gerald Davis, Barry John, Phil Bennett, Keith Jarrett. These boys were outstanding young players, and all of a sudden, and let's not forget people of the caliber of Mervyn Davies, who came from nowhere, playing for London Welsh seconds or thirds. All of a sudden, he was in the Welsh trial. The next thing, he's playing number 8 for Wales, and was a stalwart, not just for the Wales, but for the British and Irish Lions over the next decade. So there were a number of people who played a huge part in making this change and should be acknowledged for that. But from our point of view, as players, it was the most exciting period as well. Clive Rowlands became our coach, who was a character as much as a knowledgeable rugby player, which tended to take away the pressure from us.
Captaincy at 20 years old, 1968 against Scotland, and you won the game. That's quite an achievement at a very young age. I mean, O'Driscoll was 23, and I remember the noise they made about that, but he did a good job. You were 20.
Well, if you're surprised with it, I certainly was surprised with it. Whether or not they wanted to take a chance on what the future team was going to be with these young players that had evolved very, very quickly. They thought that maybe giving me experience straight away, I'm not going to say it failed, but I don't think it was a huge success. I mean, you know, I had people like Brian Thomas, Brian Thomas had been at university in Cambridge for about 3 or 4 years. You know, he played for Wales. He was a huge man in more than one sense, not just physical, in the team. So he'd been captain. Denzel Williams, British and Irish Lion. So there was loads of guys there where it did make me feel, although I had confidence, you can't but help thinking, am I doing the right thing with all these experienced guys around? So it was a bit of a gamble. I'd like to think it paid off. Didn't quite go according to plan. With a bit of luck, we might have won a few matches, which might have, well, it's like anything. You keep winning, you're still in the team, and you're still the captain, so to speak. Yeah. But it was a great experience. I absolutely loved it. Thinking that well, at least I'm the man who makes the decisions by and large as a
Yeah.
scrum half.
Yeah.
So it's quite a good position in which to be captain.
So 5 nations, 7-time winners with 3 grand slams. I mean, that's quite an extraordinary achievement. Probably the 3 in a row is going to be hard to beat. The golden age of Welsh rugby.
Yeah, I've looked back. I've got a book which is called The Golden Age of Welsh Rugby, and it was, it was exciting times. And although we played some fantastic rugby, we did play some fantastic rugby. Dare I say it? As indeed France did, and several of the teams at that time played. Scotland had some outstanding runners. France had their outstanding runners, and everybody was doing their best in which to be entertaining. But it's whether or not, and of course, 1971 which wasn't long after we started that period of thing. The British and Irish Lions won a series in New Zealand with outstanding players like Mike Gibson, like Willie John McBride. The great Barry John was probably the star of the side at that time, and you had to be there to believe the way in which he played. But more importantly, we sort of nailed our flag to the mast and said, "We're here. We've
you did
New Zealand
with that try."
We've done that, and then of course it was 74. We emulated that by being unbeaten in South Africa. So British and Irish rugby was at an all-time high. It was wonderful, very exciting, lots of excited people. And the Barbarians New Zealand game. So I suppose when I have an opportunity and have people like you reminding me, I suppose there were moments where we could maybe sit back, take a sniff of the air, and think, oh wow, maybe it wasn't all that bad. Although it's quite interesting, and I don't mind making this statement. Sean Edwards pulled me to one side a couple of years ago when he was down coaching Wales at the time. He says, Gareth, he says, I always sort of I followed you during that time because he was in his eminence as a rugby league player at the time.
Yep.
He says, and I know you scored some great tries. You scored a lot of tries. That's the team. That is not one talking person. But I was looking through your records the other day. He says, and you know what stuck out for me? You didn't win those Grand Slams. He said, on the number of tries you won it on your defense, and that's why that side was so good. God, he shocked me, I've got to admit, because we all tend to get carried away thinking about some of the great tries that Phil Bennett scored, that Barry John scored, that Phil Bennett sidestepped this, sidestepped that. But of course, it took all sorts, and that's the lovely thing about rugby, isn't it? It takes every kind of personality and player to contribute to the team. You've made me look at that a lot more closely since he mentioned that to me.
How did it feel? You started your first game against France, and then in 78 you had your last game against France, which is just how O'Driscoll did it. His first and last game was against France. I was actually at his last game. And also, it was when Ireland won the Grand Slam that year, which you did as well in your final game against France. That's quite a spectacular way to finish. So how was the party after that?
Well, it was a completely different French side to the one that I played against, first of all, in 67, and the way in which they played. But the Slam side of Wales was a very experienced team. And that was a different kind of side that played from the early sides. I didn't deliberately earmark that. I knew what we've got to remember, and maybe lots of your younger members watching this would realize, is that we were amateurs, that we all held down jobs, we all worked Mondays to Fridays and then got off, had a little run out and played a game against France in Paris and England in Twickenham and what have you, in front of 70,000-80,000 people, and then back to work on Monday.
Surreal.
Yes. So all of a sudden the games are coming up thick and fast. I'd already been on 3 Lions tours and several tours with Wales. There was another Lions tour coming up in 1977. There was another tour coming up with Wales in 1978 to Australia. And Clive Rowlands was already asking, come on, right, I want you boys ready for those tours, or you come in. And of course, we all held down jobs, and we all, by that time, had families as well, young boys and a family, which meant that there was a tremendous amount of pressure from a family point of view. And I started thinking to myself, well, and it wasn't a question of have we achieved everything. I'd still love to play, but I didn't think it was fair in asking Maureen, can I go to Australia again? Can I go to New Zealand again? And leave these boys behind. And not only that, every time I went on tour, my employer, his only words to me was, Gareth, if Maureen can do without you, I can do without you. Which was a huge sacrifice for him, you know, and make no bones about it, being amateurs or what have you, if it hadn't been for his kindness or what have you, we couldn't have afforded to go unless, you know, we were being paid for doing the work. So it was a question of decision.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I thought, I've had a good innings. I'm not injured.
Yeah.
By and large. I loved the game as much as I'd ever had, but I thought, I've got to make decisions. I don't want to ask Jack Hamer once again. I don't want to ask Maureen once again. Can I go to New Zealand? Can I go to South Africa? And so I made the decision. Well, I sort of thought about it, but the moment happened in the game towards the end of when the final whistle went and we'd won the Grand Slam against a great French side again. And Jean-Pierre, my great friend and wonderful French player, came up, put his arms around me. He said, Gareth, he says, okay, old Foxy, he said, it was your game today, but maybe next year it'll be mine. And I looked at him in his face and I said, yeah, yes, it might very well be. And as I was doing that, I was thinking to myself, there's never going to be a next year. It all of a sudden came to me that this could be the end of it. The only thing I promised myself, and I think it is very important for anybody who passes that, I didn't rush into saying, I'm finishing today or I'm finishing tomorrow. I've been a great believer ever since I was a young boy. I used to love smelling that fresh grass in September. That made you want to go out there and play and dive in the mud and dive everywhere. And I said to people that I knew, well, there might not be next year, but I didn't tell the press or whatever until very much the season was on us. And I also thought, give yourself time, because when that smell of that liniment and smell of that grass is in your nostrils, it can change. It can change a thousand thoughts.
We were putting in the SOUS BOCK during the renovation. We're putting the smell of deep heat in the toilets. We literally have a diffuser being stuck in at the moment. The sound of rugby.
Well, I better not go to the toilet then, because I might want to run out and have a game.
An amazing career. Obviously, everyone always talks about the try in the Barbarian '73. And also the try. I also watched again that try against Scotland in '72, where you looked like you literally at the end of it there was no steam left in the machine.
Oh, you can. Well, it was a very, very wet day, and of course, we'd had a bit of a tough time against Scotland, especially in that first half. They were well ahead and really looking as if they were going to, keep us really tight. We wouldn't get back into it. Anyway, we got an opportunity to score just before half time, and the crowd got on their feet and rose a fervour somewhat. You could sense that they were up for it now. And I thought to myself, right, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put the ball long, or I'm going to try and get down into their territory so that the crowd will get on our side. And the ball was tapped back. I thought, Di Morris was always on my inside. That's why we used to call him the Shadow. Clive Rowland named him the Shadow. He says, wherever Gareth goes, you got to be Di, the Shadow. So I thought, right, I'll get down to the touchline, pass it inside to Di, keep the momentum going. That's all that was in my mind. And if you ever watch it again, you can notice it. I'd run down and I'd gone, where is he? I'm looking this way, I'm looking that way. For the first time ever, the Shadow wasn't there. So I had to keep going. And I thought,
that's why you kicked it.
Yeah, let's keep it going and try and, get down there, not knowing what was going to happen.
Then the athletics kicked in.
Well, that's the point I was making, isn't it? There's no doubt that my athletics helped me in that, and in the mud and my gymnastics, because I had to dive for it. And as I dived for it, I made a somersault. Not an intentional one, but at least I was able to sort of I had the ability to think, even though I was in a somersault, so to speak.
You look like you're winded, and you sort of shook yourself out.
I was terribly winded. In actual fact, you're right, because in actually diving for it, it sort of jackknifed me. And yes, I was winded. And one of my favorite moments.
So the French rugby, so it is for a French rugby pub. Could you give me your thoughts of French rugby back in the day, memories of playing in France, your perception of French rugby, French players?
One of admiration, always was, even, names from the past like Lacaze and Mias, listening to them on the radio and the way in which the commentators used to talk about the excitement when the ball was in their hand. And then, of course, as I became more, and I actually played against the French juniors, so I had an opportunity to sort of do that as well. There was something about the way in which they played the game that you wanted to be a part of it. Great admiration, no question of that. And then as I sort of became closer and closer, as I related earlier, of the possibility of getting my first cap for Wales, of actually playing. God, I'm going to be playing against these guys. We've remained great friends ever since, since that match. I played for the Barbarians with him, and I call it Lacaze. So that he's even invited me to the tennis in Paris, So the friendship has evolved even longer than the rugby, so to speak, with these guys. Benoit Doga, I was fortunate enough to spend some real good time in South Africa with him when we were invited to be part of a World 15 and spend quality time and get to know these people. So French rugby and French teams have been great favorites of mine, and I've admired them and I've respected them. And I love the way in which they play the game. They've got. I know that they play a tremendous amount of basketball in their schools, which is why probably most of them are so good at planting the ball here, there, and everywhere. As Clive Rowlands warned me when I was going to play my first game, I asked him, Clive, have you got any advice? Not really. He said, you'll be all right. He said, if they start shouting, come on, France, Francais, and what have you, he says, run like hell, he says, because he said, there's no answer to when they're in full flight. And then I made some wonderful friends with Jean-Pierre Rive, Jean-Claude Scrella. Even though they were, the opposition, we played against one another over a period of time, had a chance to play for the Barbarians, got to know them even better. So nothing but great admiration for French rugby. And when you look back over the years, some of the eminent great players that they were and still are, really.
Especially the under-20s.
Yeah. And You know, I hope they. You don't really want to say, I hope they become world beaters and what have you, because you're going to have to play against them by and large. But you know what we mean. We admire good rugby and good rugby players, and
That's it.
France have been very much that for decades.
What about scrum halves over the years? What scrum halves stick out in your mind?
Well, Jacques Verhoeven wasn't it? Well, I wouldn't call him a typical French scrum half. He was Napoleon, wasn't he? He was the leader. He played the game himself with a huge pack.
Mm.
So in many ways, that French side evolved and changed somewhat. And Jacques was precisely the right kind of leader that they required. Very little mistake, don't make mistakes, kick the ball, keep the ball, play the ball. It was very much not necessarily 8-man rugby, but it was tight rugby. And with forwards of the caliber that was there at that time, I'm almost too scared to say their names because I'd probably want to look and duck somewhere and go and hide somewhere. Some wonderful players. I played against probably about half a dozen French scrum halves. Somehow or other, they didn't last very, very long. France had a habit of wanting to change a team all the time.
What are your predictions for the World Cup?
I had no predictions. I hadn't really been. It's not bothered. I haven't really become involved with it quite lately. But I actually happened to watch the last week or so. You don't have to look much further than New Zealand. Dare I say it? Paying them the compliment of how well they played against South Africa on the weekend. Mm-hmm. Australia have a habit of coming good at World Cups when it matters.
So Argentina beat them.
Yes, I'm very much aware of that, and beautifully done as well. What a great win that was, having to do it, having to come back twice, so to speak.
Yep.
But the reason I'm saying that, Argentina will be the sort of side that will put somebody out that we didn't expect to. With great respect to them, I love the way they play. Mm-hmm. Having played against them, I know they're quite capable of beating anybody in the world on their day. Yeah, no. I'm not going to make them favourites because they could easily beat anybody, but they might get beaten themselves. Whereas when you look at South Africa, when you look at New Zealand, as they did on the weekend, I thought, who's going to beat these boys then? They're match hardened. They've got outstanding individuals. Mm-hmm. And I think they're coming to the fore at the right time. Yeah. And as I said, just to make the point about Australia, they have that habit of being good during World Cup. So, yeah, they've got it all to do. I think it's quite open, but hang on a second. You know, we might want to celebrate something in Paris because this French side will take some beating.
Yeah.
And with some fantastic players, as we all know. Mm. Well, one of my favourite players, and I've happened to be able to meet him several times, Dupont, Antoine, outstanding player, capable of changing the game at any time. He's got the forwards around him who are quite capable of making sure they get plenty of ball. And Damac seems to be playing better.
Oh, he was lucky at the final. He was having a terrible game, and then he scored the winning try against La Rochelle. That was brutal.
But stop and think what you just said. You're very lucky in the final.
Yeah.
He was having a bad time and then changed the game.
Yeah.
That's what he's capable of doing, He hasn't got to score tries every 2 minutes. But if he changes the game when it really matters, which is what he's very capable of, I acknowledge what you're saying. I don't like pinpointing out all these favourites and what have you as such. I think it could be a cracking World Cup.
Advice now for young players, amateur or professional. What advice would you, Sir Gareth Edwards, have for young players today?
Well, whether they're a professional or an amateur, you've got to enjoy it first and foremost. If you were enjoying it, there's every possibility you can play at a good level. If it's not for you, get out sooner than later, because it's a tough game, as we all know, very hard physical game, especially the professional game. Yes, it does offer an opportunity for people to make a living, unlike it was in our day. That's not envy, just a point of fact. But I still believe that at the end of the day, it's a hard physical game which allows you to show off your physicality, show off your skills factor. But if you're not into it full time, get out as soon as you can. It's not a game for the faint-hearted. Fantastic opportunities to show your prowess and what have you. But yeah, it's a tough game now, isn't it? Really,
A bit too tough, maybe. We're all concerned about the health of the players these days.
well, we all should be concerned about it. I've got two grandsons who play football. I've got three grandsons, but I've got two who play football.
Okay, so they've been kicked out of the family, have they?
No, I believe it's their choice, and that's the most important thing, that they have their choice. But I just wonder sometimes whether or not the game is going in the right direction.
Right.
And it won't be people like me who has an opinion. I'll tell you who'll change the game. Will be the mothers. Because if they say, my little Johnny isn't going to play that game, so I'm hoping that isn't going to be the case, that maybe people will have an overview, look at it. Yeah, I think it does need quite a overview and a vision of how we can still maintain this game, maintain some of the physicality, maintain the skill factor, because it's still an outstanding and exciting sport.
Yeah.
But as we've seen on a number of occasions now, very demanding on the body.
On that note, thank you so much for your time. And hopefully when you're in Paris, we can have a beer. And if I'm not there, Fred definitely will.
Wow, give him my regards. Fred has been a lovely friend for a number of years.
He's very fond of you.
With my great friend, Jean Cormier, who introduced me to so many bad habits.
Good for him.
But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.